Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Dun& Bradstreet White Paper, launch of White Paper, how CMOs are engaging with customers through technology and solutions. Today, we have with us Mr. Avinash Gupta, Managing Director and CEO, India, Dun& Bradstreet, and Dr. Arun Singh, Global Chief Economist, Dun& Bradstreet, to take you through the nuances of the white paper. I hope you enjoy the session. Uh, After the presentation, we would have a Q&A session. We would request you to put your questions in the question tab on your screen. With that, over to you, Avinash.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you all. As my colleague Noina said, my name is Avinash Gupta. I am the head of the Dun & Bradstreet business here in India. And along with me is Dr. Arun Singh, who's our global chief economist. And maybe we are the only two people wearing jackets this afternoon in Bombay, but we are both looking very good. So very happy about that. So first of all, thank you to see you all. Glad you could take the time to join us. As Noina mentioned in her opening comments, we've been doing a series of these since the last few weeks. You know, as you know, we talked about having done some really good on-the-ground research earlier in the year, late last year, and we've collected a lot of data on various things which impact various aspects of corporate world. And the first one we focused on the SMEs, and the last one was on CIOs. And the third one, which we are doing today, is focused on the CMO side of the corporate life cycle. So I'll set the stage a little bit, and then obviously Arun will walk you through the survey. And as Noina said, we'll be happy to take any questions and comments towards the end. And we hope you'll enjoy the afternoon and find it useful. So moving on, and just in terms of setting the stage, what's really, as we all know, that what's been happening for the last 14 months or so has really impacted each one of us personally, each one of us as families, each one of us as businesses, and obviously there's a huge transformation happening around how businesses interact with customers. And more on that later in terms of the digital interface there as well. But in terms of just walking you through a few slides before we get into the survey findings itself, clearly the pandemic has led to sea change in consumer behavior. And I guess some of these are here to stay for longer, perhaps some of them forever, and some may be more short-lived, possibly temporary. I think, the right side of the chart is where we believe more of the permanent changes will be, for example, in these four segments. I think all of us have personally gone through the upheaval of working from home, managing to make peace with that, trying to find ways to make that effective in terms of not only time utilization, but also in effectiveness, trying to work with technology better in terms of conferencing. And some of that will remain forever, as we've seen most companies. Nobody's expecting a switch back to the old model. I think all of us who work for large corporates, I think would have seen, if I can use the word, optimization or realignment of the real estate footprint, for example, and that's not going to change as well. And that's going to have a huge impact in terms of, as you know, the real estate sector is such a large part of any economy, be it OECD or emerging, and these changes would stay forever. Wearing mask, I don't know. Some of us are old enough to have lived through the SARS crisis in Asia, which was a little less than maybe two decades ago. And after that, in Singapore and Hong Kong, which is where I was. I had worked for some periods in my life. Wearing masks became the right thing to do and the polite and the cultural thing to do if there was any chance that you could possibly infect somebody with a cold or whatever. So I guess each geography and each culture will be different, but some of these changes obviously will stick forever. But for example, telemedicine and on-demand well-being and things like that on the healthcare side will obviously be dramatic changes, which are very relevant to some corporates who are operating in that sector. So, but I think more importantly, this is going to lead to businesses and corporates reorienting their product offerings. over a very short period of time, possibly. Some products and services may cease to exist, while some new ones will emerge. And obviously, how they will be sold and marketed is going to be the, the challenge for companies and professionals who are working in those companies. Moving to the next slide, again, the change in consumer behavior and change in customer behavior and the ecosystem driven by the pandemic have led to businesses in terms of reconfiguring their business models. I touched upon it in the previous slide in some of my comments. From rebalancing the supply chains to managing the remote and hybrid workforces, to adopting digitization, to Industry 4.0 technologies. Business models are changing dramatically and rapidly at a much faster pace than I think any of us anticipated or any of us have seen before in our careers. I mean, some of us who've been around, I joke about it in banking. When I used to talk to my mentors when I started out in banking, the mentors used to say that they lived through the time when fax machine was not there. And from fax machine, you move to on-demand emails. And the whole world's changed so rapidly in the last 14 months that if you spoke to, I think all of us spoke to any of our mentors, they would just be completely surprised. I think in relation to this slide, maybe some broader, at Dun & Bradstreet, we're also part of the wider network. So earlier this week, some of me and my colleagues, we're also part of a bigger effort on some of the business groups, and we had an interaction with some of the corporates along with one of the ministers as well. And again, right across the chain in terms of the corporate world, it was interesting to see examples of how people have digitized so rapidly and so quickly in terms of their access to market, in terms of information, in terms of product offerings, in terms of adaptability. And I guess the journey will just continue going forward. So I think a new beginning in terms of how business is done in many ways. And again, moving on with that, the underlying factor bringing about the changes in doing business has obviously been the digitization, which I was just talking about, and that's happening right across the company, right across the firm. It's not in one silo; it's right across the platform. And businesses have been digitizing their working processes and adopting automation tools to function seamlessly, with obviously the early adopters gaining real competitive advantage, I think, than those who are lagging behind. However, it is important to track the disruption as well as the emerging trends and opportunities to be able to survive and thrive. I think one can clearly see that the gap between the winners and losers will be tremendous. I think, like we said, that some products and some processes and habits might just fall away. I think some companies will fall away, which are beginning to already, which will be quite a challenge in terms of the ecosystem itself as to how things move going forward. And I think clearly rich pickings to be had for the winners, and as I said, possibly the graveyard for many of the losers. And I think the key to keep in mind also is that capital is going to flow with the winners. So I think capital is going to be the consolidating factor as well. And if you are able to adapt, adopt, digitize, and be in the winning camp, I think there is a lot more to be had going forward than the lack of it. And it is in this specific regard that the CMO or the marketing function, which we are focusing our conversation this afternoon, are playing a very important role in terms of positioning the entire firm to the new needs of the market. The CMOs are leading the strategic role to understand the changes in consumer behavior and market dynamics so that the organization can serve their customers better and stay relevant in these uncertain, surreal times, of which I think nobody is assuming that they will be quick closure. And however, despite what's happening in the marketplace, the challenge remains for the go-to-market teams to have the right information. Next slide, please. and to close the information gap between what the organizations know about their accounts versus what accounts know about their own risk profile, more so during this pandemic. This information gap, which is identified by accounts and how they are impacted during this crisis or disruption, can be closed by possibly following the three dimensions of fit, intent, and risk. Fit, clearly focusing on the bits which drive consumption, parameters around the location, its sector, size, the intent driven around timeliness, digital activity, prospect engagement, and the risk bit in terms of the financial pressures, the financial profile, the inability to our ability to make payments on time. And as done in Bradstreet, we have a series of tools and products which can help CMOs in terms of looking at these information gaps and trying to close the gap, if I can call it, to as much as possible. Nobody can close it entirely, but closing the gap as much as possible to make businesses more effective. So clearly with this information, sales and marketing professionals can market to the right accounts, access their pipeline risk much better, and allocate resources better based on the understanding of financial risk. So I think these are some of the opening comments we had. If I can hand over to Dr. Arun to walk you through the survey, and then both of us can come back and take your questions and comments as well. Thank you. Dr. Arun.
Thank you, Avinash, for such a wonderful insight. And that's indeed today's in today's world, and when we talk about hyper-connected digital world, and the pandemic have just accelerated that space, the importance of CMOs have basically gone up many fold, and most of the organization on this planet are looking up to the CMO to drive their sales and the growth opportunity. And that was the basically intention when we reached out to the CMO community last year towards the end of the calendar year to understand what is the impact of pandemic on the CMOs and how CMOs thinks about the budget and how basically they're thinking about the future digital story and how they are basically trying to digitize the entire what you call the framework from client targeting to client acquire and nurturing and managing that. That's basically the role of CMO have evolved, and it's a more important today given the pandemic and given the fact that organizations are now moving to the digital. So with that, I will try to present some of findings which we had. After this presentation, we'll basically release the white paper, which is quite lengthy and quite insightful. But some of the findings we thought we'll present it here, which is basically key takeaways from our perspective. So during month of November, December, we reached out to something around 200 CMOs of companies where the revenue is more than 500 crore. And the idea of this survey, we just wanted to understand 4 key questions. And we basically were trying to understand what is the outcome during the pandemic and the post-pandemic from a CMO perspective. Basically, we reached out to various industry group from automobile sector to BFSI, ITITS, telecom, retail sector. And in terms of the coverage, it was almost pan-India, in terms of their headquarters was from Ahmedabad to Mumbai to Delhi. It's basically a fair bit of coverage, which we can say it's like, say, microcosmic arrangement of all the company in India and across various sectors, across various cities. The revenue bracket was more than 500 crore, but that was sometimes some of the big companies were also captured. And 4 key questions we were basically trying to address. 1, what is the marketing budget allocated across sectors, and what are the key marketing activities pursued by the CMOs for the company they are employed with? So second, how are the companies deriving revenue through the digital platform? And the third, how are CMOs effectively targeting their customer through digital platforms? And the fourth, and it's very critical and very important, especially when you're talking about Industry 4, and some of us already started talking about Industry 5. In that scenario, how are the technology used by CMOs to manage data and gather actionable customer insight? Because I think that's a very critical in a hyper digitally connected, what we call is a UCA world, basically uncertain, volatile, complex, and ambiguous. This is the term coined few years back, but now every year passing is getting more and more relevance and importance. And each organization and each function, especially the CMOs, are taking care of by using the newest technology, data, and the customer insight on the data. So let me talk about some of our findings across various various sections of the questionnaire, various sections of the what we call theme for the white paper today. One is about the marketing budget. Now, marketing budget, if I talk about, 1 in 5 surveyed companies, and in fact, the CMOs of 5 surveyed companies, they said they've allocated around 20% of their sales revenue for the marketing activities. Some of the sectors, for example, if you talk about retail sectors, 76% of CMOs put together some more than 20% of their revenue in the marketing budget. Against the real estate, where just 8% people have put together. In fact, 77% just put up to 10% of their sales toward the marketing activity, which we can understand. We know that last couple of years, real estate sector, the headwinds they are facing and the concern they are facing, this can be justified, and this is very clear. But the interesting part that the 76%, in fact, 92% within the retail sector, they're saying they're spending more than 10%, some of them spending more than 20% of their sales revenue for the marketing, which means huge expenditure happening in spite of the fact that there's a common notion on the ground that marketing budget has been curtailed. Is not. Actually, there's companies are spending money, and those money I'll basically talk about later, that where they are putting. Some of the organization, while 20%, 10% sound like a low or high, some of those actual data goes up to 100 million Indian rupees, as far as the budget talks about. So a huge amount the companies are spending, on the CMOs to basically target the customer, target the prospect, and more importantly, nurture them and derive some actionable insight from the database they have. Now, in terms of the marketing activities, there are many. Talk about online, offline advertising, social media advertising, data analytics. These are the 3. There are many we basically asked, but what is there on the screen is just 6, what we call the prominent, and then higher percentage of CMOs are basically saying they are using these marketing activities. Of that, advertising, social media advertising are very high. And if you look at some of the data element, BFSI, auto, manufacturing, they are using advertising, whereas what you call real estate, telecom sectors, 100% of CFOs said that there's topmost priority in terms of the marketing activities, the social media advertising, which means they are very active on the social media. It's understood because they are in the field, they're relevant, they know what's happening, and they know what's basically happening in the market, especially the pandemic. So that's a basically sectoral insight on the marketing activities. Now, the third element is a marketing channel. Now, while there are many marketing channels we interviewed and we found, but most important is basically the social media marketing channel. The 70% of the CMO, they said, 28% of their average marketing budget goes to the social media, and they are basically spending towards the social media, followed by the advertising, email marketing, and marketing lead generation at around 50%. And again, 28% of their marketing budget goes into this one. So that was basically marketing budget, marketing activities, and marketing channels across various platforms, and what is amount and where they are putting in order to get those sales, to lead, and in more than that, insight on those data, insight on the customer data, and then information they have. Now moving on the what we call the next segment of the finding, the targeting customer through the digital platforms or digital engagement route. And it's a almost one-sided finding if you look at in terms of the digital engagement. If you see, something around 80% of the CMOs, they've agreed that they basically the digital engagement have gone up, which means during the pandemic and then post-pandemic, which is basically going to remain what we call a new normal or next normal. 1 in 5 companies, they generate 30 to 40% of their sales through the digital platform, which is very, very interesting fact that we have a entire the network of generating the sales and the lead and what you call sales organization and rest of the ecosystem. But 1 in 5 companies, which is around 20% of the CMOs, feel that they are generating 30 to 40% through the digital platform, which is great. In fact, if you talk about in terms of percentage share bifurcating to the sector wise, telecom sectors around 70%, they are getting 30 to 40%, whereas automobile sectors around 60%, they are just getting 10% of the sales lead through the digital platform. So idea of this one, that we know that around 80% of CMOs have seen that increase in the digital engagement, and 20% of the CFOs, they are generating 30 to 40% of their sales through the digital platform, which means, and the sectoral bifurcation is varies from what we call 0% in the automobile sector to something around 70% in the telecom sectors who are generating 30 to 40% of their sales through digital platform, which is very, very important outcome coming from this survey. Now, the next within those second segment is the sales intelligence platform. Something around 3 CMOs out of 4, 75% of CMOs are interested, is being contacted by sales acceleration tool provider. And luckily 80% of the IT sectors and the 76% in the retail sectors are feeling the same, which means either they are using sales acceleration tool for their prospecting, for generating lead or getting a new prospect, a client, or they are intended to use this service, which means they are expecting someone should reach out to them, talk to them, and basically that's a prospect for both of them. Where they are putting the use of this sales suggestion tool, basically more than 50%. In fact, something around 50% people are using to update the contact information on companies and contacts, and the targeting prospects, and what we call a future client. And in terms of the CRM tool, there are various, but Salesforce, Microsoft Dynamics is coming in terms of the top end. The idea is that more and more CMOs are using sales intelligence platform to generate their sales lead, to find a prospect, to find a new client, and more than that, they are basically also looking at to update contact information and various what you call the news about those contact, what they have in their database through the various service provider. Now, moving on the third element of what we call survey output is the database management, customer insights, and then automation. Now, the first piece, the database management. We all know that the importance of the data, and more than that, importance of the database management, and that task is with CMOs of the various organization. What benefit they see in order to manage the data and what is the outcome from the data? There are many, but these are the some 7, 8 which we put together, and the 3 is clearly differentiating from the other, other outcome or other benefit is basically creating targeted communication, personalizing communication through customer segmentation, getting real customer feedback, and improve user experience with the brand and things like that. Basically, they just want to keep connected with the client, having a more and more real-time information and data feed for those customer, and trying to have a more information about those customer in a dynamic VUCA world. And that's what basically they see the top 3 or top 4 benefit from the database management. Now, in terms of application of what we call a high-end technology, industry 4 technology, which is rampant and is being used by many companies. In fact, CMOs of IT/ITES sectors, 94% of CMOs or IT/ITES sectors, they say that there is a use of artificial intelligence, machine learning tools have gone up, whereas 76% in the retail and 70% of the BFSI sector, they're saying that use of this technology have gone up. In fact, in terms of application they use, is largely around the data security, decision making, process automation, customer interaction, and then data mining. The good thing is that if you look at the sector-wise variation, it's the lowest sector where lowest percentage of sector where basically they said they're using artificial and machine learning technology is basically something around 33% in the telecom sectors, which means they are anyway they're already ahead of the game. They're not experiencing in fact increase. In fact, they're already using it's for the rest of the sector, especially in the manufacturing sector. The pandemic have pushed them to use because they will otherwise they're basically risk of losing out important insight of the client and important sales lead or important what you call customer in the market. Now, moving to some of the tools for the refreshing the database, we reached out to the CMOs, and importantly, more than 50%, in terms of the number, 56% of CMOs revealed that they are interested and willing to explore various tools to refresh their data. And by sectors, if you look at the telecom sectors, again, leading the pack, automobile sectors, they're still exploring in order to refresh the data, but retail sectors, IT/ITES, telecom, they are basically leading the pack, and they just want to keep refreshing their data at a quick interval, which means they realize the importance of the data, they realize the importance of the sales acceleration tool. And given that, the only things left out is how fast they're refreshing the data, because it's changing. Today we are talking about, maybe tomorrow most of the company database will change. That's what at a global level we are doing. That's constant refreshing the data is again very critical and very important tool to stay ahead of the game. I think CMO community have realized that, and that's what basically coming out loud and clear from this survey output. Now, moving to the third piece of the third section of the survey, that's basically data analytics for the customer segmentation. And in fact, some of the sectoral bifurcation, if I have to see IT/ITES sectors, real estate, retail, more than 90% of maybe up to 100% of the surveyed CFOs, they are using data analytics for the customer segmentation, and that what you call sectoral bifurcation, if you see, that varies. But even the lowest sector, that's a broader manufacturing sector where the rest of the pharma and automobile sector lies, they are also using something around 64% of they said that they are using data analytics for the customer segmentation, which is great and which is very great insights coming out from this one, that where this most of the CMOs are using the data analytics tool in order to derive insight and the knowledge. Now, that lead to the fourth of the third section, probably the last what we call finding of in terms of the insight and the survey outcome in terms of the marketing automation going forward. 90%, to be very honest, if I have to round out, it's 100%. Pretty much everyone we reached out, either they are already automated, they are under process of automating, or looking forward to automate by end of 2021. They're basically what we call the marketing automation. Sector-wise, sector-wise penetration, if you see, I think BFSI, we all know that BFSI, IT sectors, retail sectors, because of their supply chain network, they're already 60, 65% or 70% of them said they're already digital, what you call, they have automation. Remaining, they said they will do in 2021. But the idea is that more than 90% across various sectors, either they are already automated or using any marketing automation tools, or they are expecting to use marketing automation tool in 2021. That's basically, I think, a power of marketing automation tools. They've realized, and that's the organization are moving in that direction. They don't want to miss the bus. Now, with that, I'll just try to wrap up. What is the key takeaways from this insight? I can basically bundle into the 5 segment. One is a marketing spend. As I said, 1 in 3 surveyed companies allocate more than 100 million for the marketing activities, which means the marketing budget is not going down, and that's intact. And they've realized that, the importance of keeping more and more fun for these personas. The second is the digital engagement. 1 in 5 companies generate 30 to 40% of their sales through the digital platforms, which means the power of digital platform is very, that itself indicate that how important the digital platform today. Connect with customers digitally. More than 70% of the CMOs use sales intelligence tool, and in fact, there are many others who are basically intending to use, sales intelligence platform to connect with their customers. The 4th is a database management, and I said that use of artificial intelligence, machine learning tools have gone up in order to get some insight from the database management, and not just insight, also keep refreshing the data as and when, or maybe at a very, very what you call high frequency rate. And the 5th is basically marketing automation that's coming out, which is basically 90% of the CMOs will have a marketing automation tools by end of 2021, and that's what basically coming out from the survey. What it mean for all of us today, and for the companies out there who are basically trying to understand what it means for us and how we can leverage through this development which pandemic have thrown, and most of the company around us, in fact, the same company where we are working and then company around us, or the client and the prospect, vendor, both sides, the changes they are the changes they have seen, and then fund allocation happening in, especially in the digital penetration, how we can take a benefit around that. In that context, basically, I just want to touch base how DNB can help to the wider CMOs community through their marketing and sales solutions. Today we have many platforms support the marketing and the sales persona in order to connect with the prospect, the new client, in order to have more insight on their existing client, in order to get a better perspective, better insight on those existing client, on news, development, some hierarchical change, contact change, financial deterioration, or as Avinash was talking about, bridging the information gap between what we know and what is there in the market. With that, we know that 250,000 companies visit our database constantly, regularly, and they come and they see what's happening in the company. There's basically create visibility and credibility, amongst the 250,000 company. That's one advantage of getting associated with the sales and marketing solution. Understand company and contact coverage and get a look-like prospect based on 120 million business records across the world. And there are identification, there are managed risk and opportunity of potential partners and customer insights into industries, market, and economies globally. Integrate your internal data with over 600 attributes from the Dun and Bradstreet to understand the market coverage. 600 attributes, which means pretty much everything's it's covered in the for that particular client. Now, one thing came loud and clear: use of the data analytics is the customer segmentation. We have what we call the business signals, install technology, data, and financial parameters to enable precise segmentation. And that's what basically was coming out from this survey. Identify, understand, market optimize, go to markets planning, and execute campaigns with confidence. All those are basically can be very helpful through this set of the product, which is listed on the left hand side in terms of getting the visibility, corporate linkages, understanding the hierarchy, cross sell, upsell opportunities across the pool of the client base. That's all can be done through this set of the product. Now, one thing was coming out very loud and clear, in terms of the master data requirement and how we can fill those gaps with what we have and what is there in the market, what we don't know about those customers, what we don't know about those prospect, and what is a very critical information for that. What we call a master data management, master data requirement is basically there are 4 key requirements to mastering data. One is a structure, connectivity, coverage, and then quality. If I have to start from the structure, which is what you call the fundamental and most foundational aspect, you need to standardize structures or data model for your relationship and for the most important data you have about those relationships. The 4 components to focus on are the, about to know about those client is the, in order to know the unique identifier is basically its hierarchies, its location, and its role, and having a what we call more insight on that piece. That's a basically structure, structure of that one. If you have what we call standardized structure and common definition across the enterprise for those 4 components, a lot of data problems go away. We have Dun and Bradstreet, what we call Dun and Bradstreet Dun's number that provide most critical component of structure, a unique, persistent, and globally recognized and consistent and acceptable key that bridges the your data silos. In fact, and also data silos with your customer and your vendor and your prospect. That was the basically structure and the need of having a standardized structure to understand the entire hierarchy, entire chain of hierarchy. Now, the second is basically the connectivity. And it's a common definition, if you talk about in terms of connectivity is your own data internally, whereas within the department and externally with various stakeholders. One side you have a customer and other side you have a vendor. Across all your different systems and the processes that need connectivity, because it's a one point view about entire chain of a data, right from a internal ecosystem to the external ecosystem. That's one thing. And the third is basically the coverage. The appropriate level of coverage, in fact, to manage and grow your business is very critical and very important. Whether talk about 20 data point or 100 million data point, one should know the more and more data point in any ways give a better prospect and get a give an opportunity in the market to stay ahead of the curve. That's basically the coverage talks about, and how you know that what is there with your in-house and what is there outside, and how you're basically marrying both to have a two-way approach. One, the more information in terms of what you call depth and breadth on the each client base and the prospect we're talking about, and same information across various entities and various companies across various geographies and the section and the sectors. That's basically coverage one needs. And then most important is the basically quality, and there's very emotional piece attached to this one, and most of us always talk about that. In fact, for for quality, if I have to look at one thing, normally we speak, the quality comes last. What is very critical, and at this point of time, what we normally advise and to our client, that we normally share what we do. In fact, we have very robust and very specific view of the quality that include accuracy, which is ability to verify against multiple sources or against an external authority. The second is the completeness, and third is a timeline. Timelines is basically it's a how latency in the data, and the fourth is a cross-border consistency, because this data point, what we'd call about, is not just India specific, across all those countries we've captured, and how it's consistent across those line items. And that's basically what you call the quality item, what we normally talk about. These are some of the best practices we normally advise to the client in order to master their data, in order to remove the data silos, in order to remove the information asymmetry or information gap, because even if you are fully digitized, if these information gaps are not filled, or these gaps are not what you call eliminated, then the true benefit of the fully digitalized world will not be derived. So in order to get a full benefit of the fully digitalized world, we need to fill this information gap, and I think the master data is one answer for that. With that, I will close my presentation, and I'll happy to have any questions from our participant. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Arun. I think that was a very comprehensive but very kind of rapid run through of the survey. Please do take a look at the survey, and if there are any other elements of it which you want to discuss in greater detail, do please let us know. Happy to take any comments or questions you might have. Rana?
The first question comes on knowing the statistics of the survey. Please share the sample size statistics, Arun. Offhand?
So it's around 250 companies, yeah, I think. Across sectors, 250 companies across almost 7-8 sectors. The prominent sectors we have covered up, which is basically more number of CMOs were representing from those sectors, and there's a pan-India. In fact, all those big cities being covered across geographies. So 250 companies, more than 500 crore revenues, and across various sectors and various cities.
Arun, somebody is asking that every company generates a lot of data themselves. So how can they enhance and use their own data to improve the impact of their marketing?
So that's what I was basically talking about. Those master data element we're talking about. Basically, how one can take a help of those data analytics and insights and generate insight on those data. And by bridging the information gap first by taking help of the MDA and taking a second layer of help of data analytics in order to get the insight, because one data element can give you 5 to, in fact, 5 is a minimum. There's infinite insights that how can that can be viewed, with a different direction. So I think data analytics is one way. Before that, you have a bridging the information gap, and if you follow this too, I think insight can be drawn from this data.
If I can add to that, Noina, Dr. Arun, I think I don't know who the question is coming from, but people like ourselves, as Dr. Arun was saying, also run very large analytics programs, analytics teams. We do this thing for customers as well in a very joined up manner. So we, for example, in our case, we do assignments alongside customers where we use your data, which you have got yourself, and all the other data which Dr. Arun was mentioning, which may add to the data you have, and then combine the two in what we call the Analytics Studio, for example, and then give insights which may be useful for companies. So we do that currently in terms of better prospecting, intelligent prospecting, designing where customers should locate their businesses, which businesses should take more focus, which sites should take more preeminence. So all of that is doable. So the data which you have, as you rightly put, is very valuable, and we can combine that with our data and expertise and come to conclusions which may be very valuable for you. So please do reach out if you think there is any thing you'd like to take forward. Thank you.
Somebody's asking that, when you have a contact database, so how often that a contact database should get refreshed in today's dynamic world? We have a figure of how frequently Dun & Bradstreet refresh is probably one of the things that we can answer.
So I'll take a stab, Arun, and then you can add to it. I think in terms of as Arun was saying, our database is close to 455 million entities globally. Our database is refreshed every single living minute, with tens of thousands of sources and updates happening, millions and millions of updates happening every minute. So depending on the size of your organization, depending on your need, in some large organizations, we have effectively live pipes, which can update things very proactively, minute to minute. But really depends on what your need is, depending on what segments you're serving, what's your customer profile, what you aim to do with that data. It could be as frequent or I guess in a logical way, one would say at least you should do it once a year, given that what's happening in the current environment, and businesses are getting more impacted, customers are getting more impacted, but it really will depend on your requirement. Arun?
Yeah, sure. I think Avinash, you've shared everything. One element that the need of updating contact information, two things. What we do at DNB, and Avinash have shared that point. As we speak today, 5 million times our database got refreshed, and there's 30,000 data sources, more than 400 data millions across the geography. So that's basically what we do. The second, contact information. I was trying to mention earlier that most of these contact anyways get outdated tomorrow, because it's depending on how many contact you have in your database, because it's a constant churn happening on with constant changes happening on that. People are changing the geographies, companies, and rest of the other stuff. So I think higher frequency makes a lot of point here, and I think the DNB example itself is the testimony to that.
The next question, Avinash, to you, that, in present context, as a CEO of an organization, what are your expectations from the CMO function?
I think, the expectations per se have not dramatically changed. I mean, the strategic expectations remain the same. But I think, given what's happening in the external world in our own organizations, then the expectations have dramatically, widened or changed. You're expecting your CMO to be a lot more agile on top of it, being more adaptable, being able to react and adapt and change our own system and procedures and working style and reach out, go to market very rapidly given what's happening in the market. So, if you look at it, for example, if you go back last March when we had the first lockdown, just as a broader example, I think all of us were hit by a lack of understanding of as to what was happening, what is happening to each one of us, what is happening to businesses. And it took a fair bit of time for people to adapt to that. But now, for example, in my own organization with my colleagues, I can see that in the second wave and the second lockdown, effectively, if you can put it that way, has happened. Both the organization, the go-to-market functions, all colleagues are in a lot better shape in terms of adapting and being able to deliver. So that is what one is expecting. And I was joking with, I can share that with you here. We had our internal kind of, I should say, management committee call yesterday, global management committee. And one of the colleagues who joins the call is my colleague who's the CEO in Taiwan. And Taiwan, if you all recall, had pretty much no lockdown last year. They really did not have the virus. And now they've had a second, they've had their first wave effectively in Taiwan, and Taiwan has had a lockdown. Now, my colleague who's the CEO there, for them, it's a new thing. We've all been living through it for the last 14 months, but for them to have an idea of a lockdown, not being able to go to work is so interesting and funny. And I was just laughing at it myself that, all of us have been sitting at home for so long. But so I think adaptability, being able to change, coming together, using technology far better, far faster, using all elements of what exists in a large organization. In large organizations, we are sometimes lucky. We can, do a lot of success transfer. We can take lessons which have been learned elsewhere and bring them to bear. So those are some of the things you'd expect from all colleagues and definitely from the CMO. I hope that's helpful.
This is a question from the media fraternity from Economic Times and Equity. The question is, while data analytics, as we shared, is important, but so is the importance of the privacy of consumer data. So we have witnessed few instances of data breach in the recent past. So what measures are companies taking or should take to ensure that this privacy and the data breach can be avoided? Any insights on that?
I think it's a tough game out there, right? It's a tough world. I think companies, governments, it's all over. So I think as responsible corporate citizens, we at Dun & Bradstreet definitely take this very seriously. And our business is data. That is our main business. Protecting the data, making sure it's enriched every minute, and making sure that it's only available for the needs it's needed for and utilized only for that is what we do. And touch wood, I guess, knock on wood, we've been fortunate, and that requires a lot of I guess systems, procedures, training, investment to happen. We just went through our own internal training, for example, the entire firm on protecting the franchise, and it's done very seriously, very diligently. Even the junior most person has to do it. So I think it's just about getting a little bit of luck, I guess, but also getting really the investment, the systems, procedures, and technologies in place to guard your business effectively.
Arun, this question is for you. So you have been, in this research, you've been speaking to a lot of manufacturing companies. So somebody would like to know, what do you see the manufacturing companies heading to the digital journey? Is there a difference between service company and the manufacturing sector?
So in terms of digitization, certainly there was a difference earlier. And in India, that is, if you go back 40 years back, we basically bypassed those journey from agriculture-led economy, we become a service-led economy. It's not about that manufacturing was not doing well or manufacturing was not focused, that everything was done. It's just basically the exceptional performance done by the services sector, and in the market they basically led the journey and the story, and that was the basically era, and then services have transformed everything. Now, having said that, I think the manufacturing are fast catching up, and there are basically instances of rapid adoption of digital digital penetration. Now digital tool and digital what you call framework. Now pandemic has taught a very critical and very important lesson, and that importance of the digitalization. Manufacturing entities during the first lockdown was the seriously hit entity. I mean, you are putting down everything in a lockdown and you're not basically working it out. It's not just about your factory, it's also about your what we call your larger workforce. Even sitting in the offices are not able to work around it. So if you look at the survey output, some of the sectors are moving towards what we call digitization. So the journey is very slow, I could say, the before few years, but last few years we have seen the journey is fast after the Digital India initiatives launched by the government. Maybe after a couple of years there's a push happening towards that. There's a constant and conscious effort taken by the government to promote those digital penetration, digital adoption methodology, and pandemic is basically no option. They are basically moving into this one, and that force, and that's a very good thing. One, they have realized the benefit from adopting for themselves, and they've seen that what the services sector have driven and what the services sector have given to the economy. So the two benefit they have seen, and I think that's going to take the growth story very faster, and that's true because the base is low, and which means every incremental or every delta in terms of the growth will be very high. So I think many sectors are doing manufacturing, and going forward, more sector will join the league.
I think, and again, just to add to that, I think maybe Dr. Arun covered it as well. I think the cost of, if I can call it, the cost of digitization and cost of adapting some of these new technologies is also dramatically dropping. So I think now, earlier, for example, and I was referencing our call earlier in the week, the cost of SMEs, for example, manufacturing SMEs, the question refers to manufacturing, there's services, ERP systems, CRM systems, very high quality global standards available for a lot less and a lot more flexible and a lot more adaptable and much more easier to use and implement. So I think the market's also making that happen. So one would hope that would happen, because that clearly would be the right way to do it.
The next question is, do the popular belief that the budgets are getting cut, but marketing budgets are probably not cut as per the survey shows. So people want to know that where should the marketeer should focus on, in building the brand, or just focus on plain vanilla sustainability of business rather.
I mean, again, I can offer some color. I mean, the very wide question really depends on where you are in your life cycle and things to do. I think, the same thing would be to do a little bit of both. But clearly, it really depends on your particular situation, and depending on the competitive pressures you are facing, the disruption you are facing in today's environment. What are the soft spots, possibly the hills you can conquer very quickly, depending on what's happening in your sector and your competitive space. So I think it'll be very particular to your own particular situation, but in a general sense, you clearly don't want to do something which underinvests in the brand while you're doing your daily chores, and at the same time you don't want to overinvest in your brand or and let your daily take be affected in any meaningful manner. Dr. Arun, I don't know if you want to add something.
Yeah, and one point, if you see from the outcome, 1 in 5 CFO, they said they are generating 30 to 40% of the lead or sales through the digital platform, which means for that set of CMOs or company, generating lead will be very critical and very important, because that's basically the bread and butter. End of the day, they are getting revenue. Then there are other set of things that brand itself is basically generating revenue for them. It's basically mixed approach. The survey I have given some of the indication and direction towards what areas CMOs are taking the organization, the digital lead and customer engagement, data analytics. That segment is basically coming, and what we call it a new normal or next normal, and basically that's going to stay. More and more incremental delta or dollar will be allocated to that, and at the same time you need to also look at your basically your ongoing structure and ongoing priorities, and an area where basically is critical to remain in the market in terms of the brand and the day-to-day activities. So I think change is happening, but the change is change is rapid towards the data analytics and the data insights, also focusing on the day-to-day activities. But in nutshell, I think, as Avinash saying, that you need to understand which area is a high priority for you and which segment you belongs to.
With that, we have to, stop taking more questions because we are over past our time. We really thank you everyone for, joining us today. If you have any more questions, on the white paper, we would be very happy to connect with you. You can write to us at india@dnb.com. I repeat once again, india@dnb.com. And we would be happy to answer, all your queries. And a copy of the white paper will also be sent to all the participants today, and which you should see a recording of this webinar along with the white paper should be in your mailbox in the next half an hour to an hour. Thank you once again. Thank you, Avinash. Thank you, Dr. Singh.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon. Take care.
Thank you.